Hi, this is Can You See My Screen, a podcast dedicated to running better workshops, training and meetings online. I'm Michael Forrest and I do a lot of video production, live streaming and software development.
I'm Ivanka Magic. I do user research. I do a lot of talking to people, workshops, courses and presentations. And with so many businesses moving online and having to work remotely, we think we can help make this easier and better for
Yeah.
us, for ourselves, if for no one else.
No, for you. This is for you. We are
Oh, yes.
just here to try and offer some guidance and some ideas and some inspiration for you. Today we're talking about manners online. There's a whole new world of, and it's not clear what, as each new technology comes in, there's a new sort of etiquette that slowly emerges. And like since COVID and so much stuff going online, it's not everyone sort of knows quite, what the right thing to do is. And we thought we'd try and round up some of the best practices we've heard about and just like figure out the best way to be polite and professional in remote chats and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So, titles. So, you said your daughter has some Croatian materials about online manners, doesn't she?
She does.
So we could
She does
start
this.
there.
She does this school unit, this topic at school called Informatica, which is all about electronics. And she comes home and she's very excited because she's been given access to a laptop or something, which she doesn't get unsupervised at home. Anyway, they had a module on rules of behavior. There's a little bit of homework she had to do, which I thought was cool because I never got taught how to behave
Yeah.
online. And it says you have to do a correct or incorrect. On the internet, I don't need to respect anybody. Correct or incorrect? I can put up whatever I like. I don't need to be careful what I announce. So it's obviously very easy to answer. But the fact, what I enjoyed was the fact that it also speaks about your, which it's not directly relevant to running a live in-person meeting, but it talks about what traces you leave online. So, and then it has this whole
Okay.
little discussion area where they have to draw a picture of what sort of impression of yourself do you want to leave in your digital footprint, essentially, which I think is
Interesting.
quite a nice way of framing the conversation. It's like when you turn up to and I think and the fact that these kind of things exist as modules for school, because you even get, like, you see now people, the child knows when to mute and unmute themselves and all that kind of stuff in an online classroom. But the fact that as well, when you start a meeting, some people will start with, like, first some housekeeping rules. Please
Hmm.
keep yourself muted at all times. Please do, there's usually something about cameras. Often I've been in situations where they've said, keep your camera off unless you're
Hmm.
talking, or keep your camera on unless you need a rest. And so there's these kind of like setup, because we all sort of, I suppose, or at least assume that in real world encounters, we know how you walk into a meeting room, at the very least, you're going to nod at the people in the meeting room, aren't you?
Yeah.
All right, or good afternoon, or whatever it might be. Whereas turning up in a Zoom room or other hangouts are available, it's like, what do you do? Do you wave while muted? Where do you start? What's the manners? What's the right way to
Yeah.
do things?
Where do you start?
So,
And yeah, it's interesting that it's coming from this Technica, or whatever you said,
yeah,
Informatica, like
yeah.
world. It's like it's
Informatica.
not like being a person. It's not just being a person yet, but it. I mean, it will before long. That this is how you be a
Yeah.
person. And like our grandparents, my grandparents always taught me what
For
they're
being a
like. This is what order you put the knives and forks on the. But and
yeah,
so
yeah,
they had
yeah,
all
yeah,
that
yeah.
stuff. It's rude to point. It's all these things, but yeah, now we've got to figure all these things out for ourselves because it keeps changing, and it is closely bound to the technology.
Yeah,
I talked
yeah,
to
yeah.
my partner yesterday about like what she thought. She sort of looks after a lot of online meetings with students and things like that, and one of the things she said, in a lot of situations, like not turning on your camera is rude if there's like 30 people and most of them have got their cameras on. If you don't put your camera on, that's come on, man. Like you can see why that could be
Yeah, what
considered
are you
a bit
hiding?
dodge. Yeah, it's like, come on, like everyone else has had to like get dressed, right? So should you. Um, and then and then there's this whole aspect to it of there are features in your conferencing software, and you should probably know your way around it a little bit and know how to use them. So if your thing has a put your hand up button, use that button if you want to say something, rather than maybe just firing stuff into the chat or whatever. Like it's sort of like I think the host has to understand the software that everyone's using, and I think the people
Yeah.
there should be some expectation that you should at least know where the mute button is. You should know where you should be able to know where the chat lives if that's going to be a thing. And if you're coming to it for the first time, just sort of familiarize yourself and maybe just like find out what the expectations of that being used, because it can make, because when we do have such a low bandwidth communication, it's just here's the video, here's the microphone, all of those little features make a huge difference in this sort of situation.
I think the learning how to use the tool is the number one. Like it's if we're talking about manners, especially if you're hosting, to not understand how to use your tool is, I think that's, or even if we don't call it manners, like professionalism.
Yeah,
It's
exactly, and that's
I
the other
think
part. That's what
bare
this is as well.
minimum is
Yeah,
kind of, and I know there are many of them and they're all slightly different.
yeah,
But even in myself, I recognize that I don't naturally, and you don't know to go and look for the put your hand up unless you're in a meeting where somebody does it for the first time. Like we
yeah,
don't share
yeah,
tips.
yeah.
It's like, just so let's not assume that everybody knows where the put your hand up thing is. So it's like
Yeah.
maybe there's something about going back to that kickoff and the setup. Like, here are the rules. Does everybody know where the hand up button is? And maybe some of those warm up exercises that we that inevitably
Yeah.
end up getting dragged into.
Mm.
And I've done ones if you're using something more than the meeting software. So let's say you're using some whiteboarding software like Miro or Mural. Frequently, there will be a little what they call them, energizer exercise at the beginning, the icebreaker, sorry, where you go and run it in the whiteboarding tool, because that's perceived to be the more complex tool. We need to make sure everyone's comfortable
Okay.
in it. But I've never been anywhere where everyone's done an icebreaker and it hasn't dawned on me either. So I am not casting any aspersions here to just go, does everyone know where chat is? Does everyone know where these things are? Like, exits are here, here, and here, sort of
Yeah,
thing.
we use chat for this. We try not to use chat for quite like if you want to ask a question, can we ask a question on camera, please? Put your hand up and then ask it rather than throwing it into the
Yeah.
chat, because that we're trying to keep this there. Chat is for this in this situation,
Yeah.
and not for that. So yeah, that's sort of housekeeping rules. And then there's some extent to which the almost like the limitations or features of sort of conventions can arise around the features of a particular piece of technology, a particular tool, a particular app. So, for example, Clubhouse is, if you, I don't know if you've tried it, but
Oh,
it's this sort of like, yeah, it's you sort of jump in and there's some people talking and some people are on the stage and they can talk and then the rest of us are listening. But anyone can put their, can request to be on stage. But there's this thing where when you're on, if there's a lot of people on stage and you've got something to say, there's no like put my hand up button there, but there's this convention that's emerged that people quickly flash their microphone, mute it and unmute it a couple of times, and that means
I want to
can I
say
have your
something.
attention? I want to say something. And so and it's sort of like just they haven't had to add a new button. That's now just become how you do things on Clubhouse. So they don't have to add a put your hand up button, but everyone knows that you just sort of tap your mic and it's going to sort of make that little sort of like
Yeah.
maybe a bit of noise, and then you're going to see the flashing thing, and then you know that person's got something to say, and hopefully the person running the meeting is keeping an eye on that and goes, oh right, okay, brings you on stage, says, hey, well, I think you're already on stage to do that, but you don't necessarily, yeah, like if the tool isn't quite fully featured enough, then you can express what those workarounds are
Yeah.
up front as well, and then
I
that
think,
helps things
yeah.
run a bit smoother. Yeah.
I think what one thing about the I certainly feel like if people, for all, it's much easier. I feel much more comfortable presenting to and talk. If it's a group discussion, everybody should have their cameras on. But then more and more places, and I think rightly so, appreciate that everyone's not comfortable in those circumstances, or people become overwhelmed, or they would rather write their message than they would say it. They don't feel comfortable saying it. They're in a situation. And it's like, and I think that, I agree that chat is a distraction, but I also see it as a tool to get people to speak up who might not otherwise, depending on what sort of a session you're running.
Yeah. I mean, there can be a stratification of types of involvement.
Yeah.
There can be like a panel on stage of 6 people, and then there can be an audience of 100 people, and then that's where probably but I sort of wonder, like, because my first reaction is like, get comfortable, like, sort it out. Like, I want people to I want people to have to participate like fully as expected, rather than like different rules for different people. I always find a little bit, I came from a big family. It was always, as soon as someone wants a different rule for one of 7 children, that becomes this huge complicating factor. So I think I have a slightly emotional reacting to some people getting different treatment to others in that sort of situation. But I see, like, it does provide a way in. But you could even use chat to say, hey, do you mind, like, I've got something to say, can I come on and just ask a question, or I have this question, can I ask it? So that it, because you don't know how that content, it might, I know we're talking very generally about meetings and workshops and things, but sometimes this is going to be something that is going to become a video, and then maybe the chat isn't going to be attached to it anymore. And so by kind of like doing stuff in the chat, if someone doesn't, then there's conventions, right? So if you did support people asking stuff in chat, you've got to get into the habit of reading that chat message out before responding to it, rather than just sort of launching straight into it. So there's that whole aspect of it. And some people on Twitch, certainly, like, they will, their whole thing will be like, they'll read out the thing that someone said and then talk about it for a bit, and then they'll read out the thing that someone else has said. And that sort of means that now it works as a coherent piece of content, for want of a better word, in a way that if you did want to use it as a piece of content, but there were some bits missing when you sort of exported it to YouTube or somewhere, that's another reason to try and be consistent about how you manage those interactions and that participation.
But I think, going back, I think as well, I've seen that managed very well in offline presentations, where they have, maybe a Twitter stream with the hashtag going on the background while there's an in real life discussion. Same with when we were at Ubuntu, where we used to run the panel, the discussions via, we'd have IRC on the wall, we'd have which is a chat interface for those of you who don't know, and we'd be streaming out to the internet as well as having an in-person conversation. But it is up to the host, and this is where there is a sort of, I think, where the manners of the participant need to come into account as well. Like, if you are one person hosting 10, 12, 30 people, which is entirely possible on your own, then the participants also need to read the situation, because the cognitive overload of having to go, now let's turn to see what Twitter is asking. Oh, we have an interesting question from at blah 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 who says, or that is you've got, that's work, real work, depending on, and maybe it's right and that's what's appropriate, but depending on the style of the meeting, I think that sort of being considerate of the host as well is quite important.
And that's why the host, you may need to enlist support and have moderators or whatever you want to call it in that meeting, and say, look, I need someone to keep an eye on chat and like feed me the best questions, because I can't look at that while I'm presenting.
Do that.
There's those kind of conventions that are really like, and it very much depends. Like, there's this spectrum. Are we like managing a broadcast here, or is it literally 3 people having a chat? And if it's 3 people having a chat, you can sort of wing it a little bit more. but there will still be It's like, hey, look, you gotta turn your camera on. Like, I was hoping, but if, like we said in the last episode, like setting some expectations up front as well, in like a bit of boilerplate in the meeting invite or whatever, that sets people's expectations and says like, okay, we're going to be using this, but it just means it's just a lot of extra overhead for the host, as you say, like to think about those things, and maybe you're being brought in and you're relying on someone else to have done that, but they haven't communicated it. That can be very difficult if you're jumping into a tool that you haven't used before, or you're having to use something you don't like. That's a whole area of this. But I think sorry.
Oh no, I was going to go on. Sorry.
No, well, I was going to move the subject on, but then I thought you might have something left to say. We have done this hundreds of times now, so we should be good at not
interrupting each other.
Yeah, or just
this is our new format, though. So
we're trying to be more like pro.
Yeah, maybe our pro persona is just a little bit scruffy. But one of the things I wanted to bring up was the whole going back to pure old school manners, is that introducing yourself thing, and having the opportunity. So it's not just about hosting, but also, my mum's still of the generation that if somebody calls her by her first name instead of Mrs. Magic, she will do that. I'm sorry, have we been introduced? But which I think is a valid, it's quite a valid observation, especially, and a colleague of mine got caught out recently. Thankfully for me, she got caught out, so it's a very good reminder for me not to let it happen. But that thing where she assumed everybody in a small meeting knew each other, but they didn't, and she was running it away, rattling on for 5 or 6 minutes before somebody went, excuse me, shouldn't we start by introducing ourselves? And it's like, you wouldn't do that in a physical environment. It'd be much easier, or maybe you would, I don't know, but and maybe it doesn't matter the environment. It's important to remember these basic human steps, I think, of, hello, my name's Ivanka. Please excuse me if I keep switching my camera off. My webcam's a bit dodgy today, or my internet connection's a bit poor, and I find that I get a better connection if I just switch off the video or whatever. Do you know what I mean? Like, hello, this is me. I don't like to speak up, so please excuse me if I'm going to use. It's up to you as well to sort of go.
So, and then there's actually different ways you can lean on the technology as well. So you're talking, you can do a sort of like have a host sanctioned round robin. Everyone introduces themselves. That may be appropriate in some situations. Other situations where it's a larger group, but maybe a lot of people are contributing, make sure your name is set, right?
Yeah.
If there's profile features, like if there's somewhere where people can write a little profile up about themselves, kind of like encourage people to fill that in, because even like something like Discord, people jump into my chat and I like most of the time they've got nothing on their profile, but if they had something just on their profile, that would be such a help. And like Clubhouse, again, that's a whole thing. Like as soon as you start talking on Clubhouse, people are gonna like tap on your profile and read a little bit about you. So that's another way of using the technology to our advantage, where maybe we don't know, you can assume everyone knows each other, and that's a weird effect I find in these online situations where I think whenever I jump into a Discord or into a chat, and I know Discord's text chat and not really super on topic, but it's one where I feel it more, is you sort of assume everyone that's already there knows each other, but you don't know who turned up yesterday. You don't know who's been there for like 5 years. Although, I think you can see how long they've been a member of something. But again, like their profile might say how long they've been a member of some particular group, but that's not going to help you on a Zoom call. I don't know if Zoom has profiles. I don't know. But like,
it has a name.
It has the name field, which can get like lost.
Yeah. Well, but we made it for the last thing you had to put what your role was in the situation. So I was Ivanka facilitator, for example, so that it was quite clear that I wasn't a participant. That's useful when there's a big group. Just so it can be used. Some basics.
You can sort of signify that some of these people are part of, maybe it's a company that's hosting it and there's 3 or 4 people from that company and then everyone else is a visitor. if there's a way that the system, if you can put something in square brackets like that, you work for this company, and then everyone can go, oh right, oh, you're sort of a moderator, like that's your role in this, you're not just some random person telling me to turn my camera on, like it's, oh no, you work
Yeah,
for the
yeah.
thing, and like you're just sort of, who made you the, the king of,
Of
manners,
cameras.
like
Yeah.
the king of cameras. um so yeah, like again, it's very much we're at the mercy of these technical features, but we can also sort of encourage people to use them in productive ways, and just help people assume, you don't have to assume anyone's used it before, but you can point them at the thing and say, please can you, before you come on, please just make sure this is filled out so that everyone else in the
Yeah.
call can know a bit about who you
I,
are, and then that
yeah.
saves, yeah.
I wonder if if it's the housekeeping rules that we need to sort of term this as and keep as, because in those real life get together meetings, we all used to do that. If the fire alarm goes off, please, it's not a practice, or if it does go off, the loos are over here. We're gonna have a break at 11 o'clock, whatever. So I think it's just, I think, more important in a physical space, in an online space, because you've got no cues as the host or even as the other participant. You've got no body language. You can't see how much someone's fidgeting. You just got such a small window into a person's participation that you need all the help you can get.
Yeah, and then
And
maybe
so
even something like encouraging people to, in Zoom, to switch on the grid mode instead of the one where it just shows whoever's talking, can be such a huge, like, because that for me, like, completely changes the dynamic of a call for me, like, because it's so like invasive when it's just highlighting the other person that's talking. When there's 16 people, someone coughs and it's like their sort of gormless face for a minute. It's like, no, if everyone agrees to keep it on the grid mode, then I think everyone gets to feel a little bit more comfortable in that situation, because everyone knows they're never going to be like, hello, it's me, it's like, it's all me. I can look at me.
I did hear of a really nice warm-up icebreaker exercise when with the grid mode, and to sort of get people shaken up last week, which is like to get people, put it in grid mode and then get people to stand back as far as it takes to get away from the screen, so that your hands are touching the edges of the screen, your little box. So it looks like you can pass something from one box to the next, which is a nice way to get everyone to mix it all about, but also to sort of, show the benefits of grid mode, create a little game. So, there's some nice things you can do that are to do with making sure showing the features of the tool is part of the whole experience.
Yeah. And that was actually like Mythic Quest is this Apple TV Plus show where they did a whole, like, Rube Goldberg type thing in the grids, and it was all so cute and emotional. But that's what I started picturing when you were talking about that, and they did a whole thing. So it's sort of, you have to embrace the technology and not pretend it doesn't exist. You can't pretend this is the real world, because there is no body language, there is no there's no someone like glaring, there's no like there's none of that. So you have to use what's there, and that means you've got to like kind of overcome a bit of a learning threshold to achieve that. The only thing we haven't covered before we finish up, short episodes, new podcast, it's a new era, is just in terms of backgrounds and environment, and like, we know not everyone has that much freedom of control of being able to find privacy or an environment, but like, do we think there's any, obviously, like, you need to find a place where when you turn your mic on, it's not going to be people chatting, people talking, and because it's so intrusive. And that mic thing, people are realizing, like, you've got to mute the mic. If the mic's on and you're in some really busy environment, it just ruins the whole call for everyone. Because there's no, it doesn't know, the computer doesn't know, it's stupid. But do we have any thoughts about, like, the blurring your background, all those kinds of features?
I think that's I actually think that's a whole conversation. the
Yeah.
background thing.
Because you said,
This,
like, the way we present ourselves professionally is like that's part of it, and like, I have
yeah,
my it took me ages to sort of be kind of happy with my little background, but sometimes I might want to blur it out as well, depending on the situation. Sometimes it's a different time of day and I have to like light, but yeah, that's something we can maybe talk about in another episode, because there's this whole thing of there's this whole thing of like, you can also overpower it a bit if you've got this like broadcast like quality setup and everyone else is on their like phone cameras. It's a bit like, oh, who are you? Like, you don't want to sort of upstage the host in a way, like, and that's also a little weird bit of etiquette too. Like, don't be too slick if it's not supposed to be that slick, if the presenter's not going to be at that level, like, as we all kind of catch up with that video gear tech, audio tech.
Yeah, I think this is something that I want to think about more. Like, bare minimum of tidy up the background or whatever.
We shall see your progress as the weeks go on,
and trying to decide what sort of version of myself I want to project in these. If I like, there's to some extent, in some ways, in some situations, I want to be really. I don't know what professional means in this context, because all of us are working from our. If you're on a Zoom, it's because you're at home. Maybe you're in the office most of the time, or possibly in some shared office space. But most of the reason we've all had to do this is because we're all having to work from home. And there's something about being human with your background that quite appeals to me. Because this is a living space as well as a workspace. But I don't know. I haven't decided yet what I think about it.
Yeah, and it's like, going back to what you said at the start with your child's sort of online education. You've got to sort of have a think about how you want to present yourself online, and it's not just putting some clothes on anymore. It's like, how do I dress what's my backdrop, what's my whatever, am I happy to be always wearing big headphones, those kinds of things. And yes, that it can be toxic in the Instagram world, where everyone's just projecting this sort of idealized version of themselves, but just because it can go to horrible extremes doesn't mean we shouldn't be. It's not incumbent upon us to certainly think about it and think about how we want to present ourselves and how we want to look, and just pay attention to the fact that other people are going to have to look at you. So, look presentable. Kind of
try and make it not,
not too distracting and not too messy. So, yeah.
Yep.
So cool. There's an episode for us. I can't remember what I do at the end. I think I go title. I think we just play some outro music. But if you want to sort of tell us a bit about what you're doing and the problems you're facing, come to canyousseemyscreenpodcast.com, and we've got a little questionnaire where we're asking you a few questions. You can give us your tips and ideas that you've got, any thoughts that you've got, and then you can sign up to a mailing list where we will post you an email about the new episode and any notes that go with that each time. Maybe we'll have special affiliate links and things and offers. Who knows? Maybe we'll swing that sort of thing. But yeah, like sign up to that. Yeah, we'd love to get you on the mailing list so we can sort of get more involved, and I think there's going to be a Discord as well, so but that's something that we've got to talk about. I'm surprising Ivanka with, but yeah, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time. Bye
bye bye bye bye.
Connected.